This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
We're good? Mm-hmm. Okay. So I'm very excited to be able to present to you two aspects of the Parsha, two of the primary aspects of the Parsha that we're going to focus on. They seem not to be related to each other, but then we're going to find a connection. The sheets. Okay. The first one is at the end of last week's Parsha. Hashem comes to Avraham Avinu, and he tells him, "I have two important pieces of information to tell you." The first one, he says, "You know your wife Sarai, that nice lady you're married to? That's not her name anymore. She's getting a new name. She's no longer called Sarai. We're taking out the Yud. She's now called Sarah. And by the way, she hasn't had children for the last 90 years, but guess what? She's going to have a child." So Hashem tells Abraham two pieces of information. First of all, you have a new wife. Your wife's name has been changed. And number two, you're going to have a child. You're going to have a child. So what was Abraham's reaction? If you look at number one, Vayipol Avraham al panav vayitzchak. Abraham fell on his face and he laughed. Vayomer belibo, he said in his heart, Halaven meo shana yivaled. You think I can have a child at the age of 100? V'im Sarah habas tishim shana teled. Could Sarah have a child? She's 90? It's impossible. So again, what was Abraham's reaction to the news? He laughed. He laughed. It seemed he was incredulous. Then we have again in this week's Parsha, where the Malachim come to Abraham. Abraham serves them a festive meal, an elaborate meal. And what do the Malachim say to Abraham? By the way, in exactly 1 year, Sarah is going to have a child. And again, Sarah overhears this. Now, we're assuming right now that Sarah had heard this before. Because at the time that Hashem told Abraham that they're going to have a child, presumably Abraham told Sarah. So now Sarah is hearing the Malachim tell Abraham the news that in a year they're going to have a child. Vatitzchak Sarah bekir balemar. Sarah laughed in herself and she said, Achare veloisi haisali edna. After I've become withered out, my skin is going to become smooth again. Vadoni zakein. Plus my husband, he's an old guy. We're not having a child. So Abraham laughed. What does this pasuk say? This pasuk says Sarah laughed. Okay, so Sarah has the same attitude as Abraham. Vayomer Hashem al Abraham. Hashem says to Abraham, Lama zeh tzachaka Sarah lemar. Why did Sarah laugh to say, Ha'af umna meled va'ani zakanti? Can I give birth when I'm so old? Ha'yipale me Hashem davar? Is anything hidden from Hashem? Lamoyed, at the appointed time, see? Ashav elecha, return to you, ka'is chaya, as this time lives, u'l'sara vein. In other words, Hashem comes to Abraham with criticism. With criticism. What is Hashem's criticism? Why did Sarah laugh? Something's not fair over here. Why did Sarah laugh? Abraham also laughed. Why is Hashem only criticizing Sarah when in Parshas Lech Lecha Abraham had the exact same reaction? If you look at number one, Vayipol Avraham al panav vayitzchak. Vayitzchak means he laughed. So Abraham laughed, Sarah laughed. Why is Sarah getting the raw end of the deal? A few people do something wrong, and one guy gets picked on. So he says, "What are you picking on me?" Right? Every time somebody gets in trouble, why are you picking on me? So here you have Abraham and Sarah. They commit the same crime. They both laugh, and Hashem only criticizes Sarah. Why is that? So we're going to present a number of different explanations why only Sarah is criticized and not Abraham. The first explanation is the explanation of the Targum. If you look on the side of the Chumash, there's something called Targum Unclus. Unclus was actually a convert who translated the Torah, but it was not his own translation. The translation of Targum dates back to the giving of the Torah on Har Sinai. The Targum says just because the same word that by Abraham, by Yitzchak, and by Sarah, Batitzchak, it means two different things. Because the Targum, if you look at number 3, when it talks about Abraham, look what the Targum translates it as. Unifal Abraham ala pohi. Abraham fell on his face. Vachadi. Vachadi doesn't mean he laughed. Vachadi means he was happy. Right? Gila, Rina, Diitzave. Anybody? Chedva. Chedva means happy. Vachadi means happy. But by Sarah, the Targum translates it as, look at number 4, V'chaycha Sarah. Sarah laughed. In other words, you know why Hashem didn't criticize Abraham? Abraham never laughed. The fact that the pasuk says Vayitzchak, it doesn't mean he laughed. It means he was happy. Hashem gave him the report. He was overjoyed. He was happy. He wasn't in disbelief. He was rejoicing. Sarah, when it says Vatitzchak, that means she laughed. Okay? Look at Rashi number 5, and Rashi says this answers our question. Why was Sarah criticized and not Abraham? Because Abraham didn't laugh. Abraham was happy. Sarah laughed. Look in Rashi. Rashi says in number 5, Vayipal Abraham al panav vayitzchak, zeh tergem unklis lashon simcha vachadi. By Abraham, unklis translates it a language of happiness. He rejoiced. V'shel Sarah lashon machof. But by Sarah, a language of laughing. Lamadata, we learn from here, she'Avraham hamin v'samach. Abraham believed and he was happy. The Sarah lo ha'amina v'liglaga. Sarah did not believe and she scoffed. V'zehu shehikbid HaKadosh Baruch Hu al Sarah. That's why Hashem got angry at Sarah. V'lo hikbid al Abraham. So in other words, what we're saying is, why did Hashem get angry at Abraham and not at Sarah, not Abraham? Because Abraham didn't do anything wrong. Abraham was happy. He was overjoyed. You hear good news. You hear, somebody, something good happened to somebody. So you smile. You almost laugh. Not incredulously, but out of happiness. Sarah laughed. She couldn't believe it. She didn't believe it. Okay, that's the first approach. Now we're going to learn the approach of the Meshech Chochmah. The Meshech Chochmah was written by Rav Meir Simcha of Dvinsk. Dvinsk was such a small little city that, when you were riding on the horse and buggy, if you would start Ashrei, by the time you got up to Soymech Hashem L'chol HaNoiflim, you're out of the city already. That's how small the city was.
My father came from Dvinsk.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, so the Meshech Chochmah was one of the great personages of Dvinsk. So listen to what he says. He says, if, let's say, Mr. Friedman, a Navi comes to you and says, tomorrow you're going to go to the convenience store, you're going to buy, a Lucky 7 scratch-off card, you're going to scratch it off and you're going to win $1 million. Does it have to come true? Remember, a prophet tells you, a Navi, a valid Navi.
I guess so.
It doesn't have to come true. Why? Because if a Navi I'm sorry, scratch that. No pun intended. But if Hashem comes and tells you, okay, so scratch it. Hashem comes and says, tomorrow you're going to go to the convenience store and you're going to scratch a lottery ticket and you're going to win. Does it have to come true?
Yes.
No. Why? Shema yigrom hachet. Maybe you'll sin in the interim, and now you'll not be deserving of what Hashem told you. For example, Hashem told Yaakov Avinu, don't worry, don't be afraid of Esav. And then it says, and Yaakov was afraid. And Chazal tell us, you know why he was afraid? He was afraid maybe he sinned, and now he doesn't deserve Hashem's protection. So if Hashem comes and tells you something himself, and a good thing's going to happen, if you're undeserving of it, it may not happen. However, if a prophet comes to you and says, Hashem told me that a good thing is going to happen to you, it has to happen. No ifs, ands, or buts. It has to happen. If Hashem comes to you, maybe you'll sin and you won't deserve it. If a prophet comes to you, it has to happen. Says the Meshech Chochmah. And this is one of the kochos, one of the powers of the Meshech Chochmah, where he says, he takes a general rule and he applies it to the Chumash. And here's the rule. And here's the application. Hashem comes to Abraham and he says, Abraham, you're going to have a child. Abraham laughs. Why? Because it might not come true. Why? Because maybe he'll sin, and he won't be deserving of it. Now, really big tzaddikim, they always think they're unworthy. A tzaddik, you know what a sign of a tzaddik is? If they think they're not a tzaddik, maybe then they're a tzaddik. Someone who thinks they're a tzaddik, then you know they're not a tzaddik. If they don't think they're a tzaddik, they have a chance, right? The Gemara says that if everyone tells you you're a tzaddik, in your own eyes you should think that you're a rasha. But in any event like this, Hashem comes to Avraham and he says, you're going to have a child. Avraham laughs. Just because Hashem told him, maybe he'll sin and he'll be undeserving of Hashem's promise. Because again, the rule is if Hashem comes and tells you something good is going to happen, it may not happen if you're undeserving. But Sarah, who told Sarah she's going to have a child? Avraham. How do we know Avraham told Sarah she's going to have a child? Because how did Sarah know her name was now Sarah? Hashem never told her about the name change. It must be Avraham told her, by the way, Hashem changed your name from Sarai to Sarah. Now, along with that prophecy of the name change was that she was going to have a child. So if Sarah knew about her name change, it must be Avraham told her that she's going to have a child. So Sarah has no right to laugh. Because if a prophet tells you something good is going to happen, even if you're undeserving, it's still going to happen. So Avraham... What?
Maybe Sarah didn't know the rules.
These people, they knew, whatever we knew, they certainly knew. They knew all the halachos, all the principles of the Torah, through divine inspiration. They had to know this. So Avraham, he's allowed to laugh. Because the rule is if Hashem tells you something good is going to happen, maybe you'll be undeserving of it. But when the Navi tells you, when the prophet tells you that something good is going to happen, it has to happen no matter what. So Abraham wasn't criticized because Hashem was the one who told Abraham. But Sarah is being criticized because Hashem didn't tell Sarah. Abraham told Sarah. And if a prophet tells you something, there's no ifs, ands, or buts. Okay. Listen to this one. Another explanation. Why only Sarah was criticized and not Abraham? Okay? Look in number 7. This comes from the Chizkuni. The Chizkuni is one of the Rishonim. Look at number 7. 4 short lines. Im Taimar. Lama lo hikbid HaKadosh Baruch Hu al Abraham k'may shehikbid al Sarah. Why did Hashem not get angry at Abraham like he got angry at Sarah? Shaharei k'may kain sachak Abraham. Abraham also laughed. K'moshe nemar b'parsha achrona shebeparshas Lach Lecha. Like it says in the final parsha of Parshas Lach Lecha. So listen to what the Chizkuni says. Let's say, you're in a shul and somebody's doing something wrong. Somebody's misbehaving during the davening. So you don't go over and tell them you're misbehaving. They'll be embarrassed. So what do? You tell them, maybe, do you know why that other person is misbehaving? I can't understand it. And in their own mind, they don't think you're necessarily criticizing them, but the fact that you bring up the issue, they realize that it's applicable to them. In other words, if you want to correct someone, it's not so good to take them head on. It's embarrassing, it's insulting, right? So you don't tell them about what they're doing wrong. You tell them about what somebody else is doing wrong, maybe even without mentioning a name. And thereby they get the picture, I also do that wrong, and I really should correct that myself. So in other words, Hashem comes to Abraham, he says, Abraham, why did Sarah laugh? And Abraham says, you know what, I also laughed. And then Abraham gets the point, Hashem's criticizing me also. Hashem, according to the Chizkuni, was criticizing Abraham. Hashem was criticizing Abraham just as much as Sarah. But Hashem didn't want to insult Abraham and embarrass him. So he did it more in a roundabout way. For example, sometimes, in where I live in Flatbush, right? So everyone goes to their in-laws for Pesach. So the mother has the daughter and her family, and the daughter-in-law and her family. And the daughter-in-law, and her son and daughter-in-law's kids, they're tearing apart the house. They're coloring all over the walls, and they're ruining the nice rug. But how could the mother tell her mother-in-law, why don't you try taking care of your kids? So what does the mother do? She says to her daughter, why don't tell your kids to behave? The daughter-in-law hears, and then she realizes, she better correct her own kids. So, by the way, there's a Yiddish expression, you talk to the daughter, but you mean the daughter-in-law. So, he says, Ela mashal leisha chachama. This is a parable to a wise woman. Sheba lehoichiach talasa. She really means to reprimand her daughter-in-law, vehochicha spita, and instead she reprimands her daughter. Umemela her gisha kalasa, but the daughter-in-law realizes ba'atzma. So too, kachem hochiach HaKadosh Baruch Hu Avraham b'fanav. If Hashem would have reprimanded Avraham, haya misbayesh, he would have been ashamed. Ela hochicho min hatzad. He sort of reprimanded him in a roundabout way. So while Rashi says that Sarah was criticized and not Avraham because Avraham didn't do anything wrong, again Rashi says Avraham didn't laugh, Avraham was happy. Chizkuni says no, they both were at fault, but Hashem criticized Avraham in more of a roundabout way. Okay? So that is the third explanation. And we said, of course, the Meshech Chochmah says that Avraham was criticized. Avraham was not criticized because he heard it from Hashem, so maybe it won't come true, so he could laugh. But Sarah heard it from the prophet, so she has no right to laugh. I'm going to tell you now a fourth explanation that comes not from a Rishon, not from an Achron, not from a Rosh Hashiva, not even from a man, from a Rebbetzin. The Rebbetzin of the Tzaddik of Yerushalayim. There was an individual by the name of Tzaddik Yerushalayim, Rabbi Aryeh Levine. Rabbi Aryeh Levine was the father-in-law of Rabbi Yosef Shalom Elyashiv. Rabbi Elyashiv is considered the Posek Hadar, the greatest halachic authority of this time for Ashkenazim. His father-in-law was Rabbi Aryeh Levine, a very big tzaddik who is known to visit people in prisons. He spent his time visiting people in prisons, visiting very sick people, people with who had leprosy, who even doctors were afraid to go into. He risked his life all the time to visit people with very contagious diseases. And his Rebbetzin offered the following explanation for why Avraham was not criticized and Sarah was criticized. What's the explanation? It goes like this. If you remember, there was once a woman by the name of the Isha Hashunamis. And this Isha Hashunamis was barren. She didn't have children for many years. And she tells her husband, we have a nice house, and whenever Elisha, the prophet, passes through the city, he always stops off in our house to stay. So why don't we make him a nice quarters for him a nice room for him to stay in. Whenever he comes, this way he'll be comfortable. So they built him a special attic, and he stayed in their house, and he was so overwhelmed by the fact that they built these special quarters just for him, that, he said to the lady, whatever you need, I'll bless you with. So the lady said, no, I don't need anything. But Elisha on his own saw that she was childless, and he promised her, this time next year, you'll be blessed with a child. Sure enough, this woman was blessed with a child. Fine. A little while later, the child grows up, and look at number 8. One day the child is in the field. Vayomer el aviv. The child says to the father, Roishi, my head. He contracts a very bad headache. Vayomer el hanar. So the father tells the lad, Sa'eu el imay, quickly take this kid to his mother. He's sick. He needs help. Again, this is the child who was miraculously born to the Isha Hashunamis. Vayisa'eu, they carried him. Vayiviyeu el imay, they brought him to his mother. Vayeshiv al berkeha, he sits on her lap. Ad hatzarayim, until the afternoon. Vayamois, and he dies. Vatal. The mother goes up. Vatashkiveu, she doesn't know what to do. So she lays the dead child down on the bed of the prophet. Remember, she built him special quarters. She lays him down on his bed. Vatashkiveu al mitas isholikim. She lays him down on the bed of this godly man. Vatiskar ba'adar vatetze. She closes the door behind him and she leaves. She has to run to the Navi Elisha, and she needs a miracle. She needs Elisha to bring him back to life. Vatikra Elisha, she calls out to her husband. Vataymer, she says, Shulchan oli echad min hanarim. Quickly get me an attendant. V'achas ha'asonus, quickly get me a donkey. V'arutza arisho likim v'yashuva. I need to run to the prophet. So her husband's wondering, why do you have to run to the prophet? What's wrong? What happened? Is everything okay? Vayomer, he says, Madua at haylechas elav hayom. Why are you going to the prophet today? It's not Rosh Chodesh. Lo Chodesh. today's not Rosh Chodesh. By the way, we learned from here that in the olden days, in the times of the prophets, they would visit the Gadol Hadar every Rosh Chodesh. V'lo Shabbos. It's not Shabbos. Why do you have to go to the Gadol Hadar today? V'atomer, she said, don't worry. Don't ask so many questions. Shalom. Everything is peaceful. Peaceful? Her only child is dead. How could she say everything is peaceful? V'tacha voisha asayin. She saddles the donkey. V'atomer al nara. She tells the attendant, Nahag v'lech, lead the donkey and go. Al tatzeli lurkav, don't hold me back. Kim amarti lachan, unless I tell you. V'atelech, she goes. V'tavaya el ishwa leikim al hara Carmel. She goes to the mountain of Hashem, where the Navi lived. Vayihi kirois ishwa leikim oisa mineged. When the man of God saw her, Vayomer el gechazi naroi. So Elisha tells his attendant, Gechazi, hine hashinamas halaz. Oh, this woman who used to host us, she's coming. Ata rutz l'krasa. Go run to her. Find out how she's doing. Ve'emr la. Say to her, Hashalom lach. Is everything okay? Hashalom le'ishech. Is everything okay with your husband? Hashalom la'yolad. Is everything okay with the child? V'atoimer shalom. Everything is wonderful. Here she is. She's running to the prophet. Why is she running to the prophet? Because she knows her only hope is that this prophet could bring her child back to life. And the prophet sends a message. How are you? How's your husband? How's the child? And what's the response? Everything's shalom. Shalom. Yeah.
ואומר לך, השלום לך, השלום לאישך, השלום לילד, ותאמר שלום. Tomer, it's not the correct Hebrew, no? It's Tomer, it's masculine, it's not feminine. If she answers it, it should be Tomeret or Tomra. Who says
Tomer? In biblical Hebrew, you see Vatomer. Tomer means she will say in the future. Vatomer, there's something called Vav HaMishapeches, a Vav that changes the tense. It makes it from future to past. Yes. So Vatomer changes it to and she said. And she said. For example, Yomar means he will say. Vayomer means and he said in the past. Okay? So again, the problem is, here she's going, she's devastated, her only child is dead. The Navi sends word. How are you doing? How's your husband? How's the child? Everything's wonderful. Everything's wonderful. Her kid is dead. She's coming for a miracle. She's coming to have the Navi revive her child. How could she say everything's okay? Says the Rebbitzin of Rabbi Aryeh Levine. And we'll read it in the English. Look at number 9. Okay, I have something in English this week. Okay? This is from the biography of Rabbi Aryeh Levine. It's worthwhile for everyone to read. You could go to your local bookstore. It's called A Tzaddik in Our Time. It's a fantastic book about a gadol whose life is quite different than maybe typical gadolim. He spent his life visiting very sick people, prisoners, criminals, and he was able to sort of cross the barriers between Charedim and Mizrachim and Eretz Yisrael. Okay, take a look at what he says. This is something the good rabbi once told me in the name of his beloved wife. Okay? There's a well-known account in the Bible of the child born miraculously to the woman of Shunem in her older years by the great spiritual influence of Elisha the prophet. When the little boy died, she set out to fetch the prophet swiftly, and he revived the child. Before she left, however, her husband asked her, "Why are you going to him today? It's not Rosh Chodesh, it's not Shabbos." And she said, "Shalom," meaning everything is A-okay. Why wouldn't she tell her husband the truth that the child had died? And why wouldn't she tell the Navi the truth that her child had died? The answer is, look at this. Had she said this, the prophet would never have been able to revive the child afterward. Once she said it in words, once she said the words, "My child is dead," that would have been the reality, that would have been the final reality, and you can't change it. She would have acknowledged the death as an irrevocable fact, and despair would have possessed her. In other words, bringing down a miracle from the upper world, from Shemayim to this world, a miracle is such a tenuous, nebulous thing that as soon as the reality is vocalized and articulated, the child is dead, there is no way to make a miracle. As long as the child may be dead, but as long as nobody says it and finalizes it and articulates it, there is still hope. Because once you articulate the reality, it's like you've given up hope. Once you give up hope, you can't have a miracle. So she didn't want to say, my child is dead. She said, everything's okay, because at least that way she could maintain some semblance of hope, and then a miracle could kick in.
Wow.
Now this is what we call Torah Shebechsav, the written part of the explanation. Now I'm going to tell you the Torah Shebechsav, the oral part of the explanation. What does this have to do with Abraham and Sarah? Beautiful. Again, we want to know, why did Hashem criticize Sarah and not Abraham? Listen to this. In number 1, Vayiploel Abraham al panav vayitzchak. Abraham fell on his face and he laughed. So what? He laughed? No problem. Vayomer belibo. He only said it in his heart. He never vocalized it. He never articulated it, that it's impossible to have a child. If you don't articulate it, you don't vocalize it, a miracle could come. But Sarah didn't just think it. Sarah said it. Look at number 2. Vatitzchak Sarah bekirba lemor. She laughed at herself, saying, she said the words, how could I have a child? You say the words, how could I have a child? You can't have a child. That's why, says the Reiton of R Aarons, Sarah is criticized, but Abraham is not. Because even though Abraham laughed, he left open the possibility for a miracle because he never said it. But after Sarah articulated it, vocalized it, you can't have a miracle. So you say, Rabbi Glatstein, if once you vocalize it, you can't have a miracle, so how did Sarah have the miracle? I thought she vocalized it. That's why Hashem comes to her in the next pasuk. Ha'ipolei me Hashem davar. Nothing's hidden from Hashem. You're right. You've destroyed and you've smashed the miracle to smithereens. Now I, God, have to come to you and make a new decree and make a new miracle. In other words, the first decree of the prophet is gone. Why? Because you vocalized it, you articulated it, you destroyed the miracle. Now I have to go through the trouble. Is anything, Ha'ipolei me Hashem davar, is anything hidden from Hashem? I'm making a new decree and now a new miracle will happen.
So, meaning if she wouldn't laugh, if she wouldn't vocalize her doubts, she wouldn't verbalize her doubts, then the Yitzhak would be born. He wouldn't have to go through the Akeidah. He would be much more perfect and would be what...
We wouldn't have needed Hashem himself to come and promise a child. The first promise that Hashem promised Abraham would have been sufficient. Now, why does Hashem have to come and say, I'm going to come to you in a year? We already know that. He already told Abraham. The answer is that was destroyed. That was destroyed. Now we need a new promise. We need a new decree. Okay. Speaking about the Akeidah, I'm going to tell you a few incredible things about the Akeidah. Look at number 11. Vayehi achar hadvarim ha'ela. It was after these things. V'ho Elokim Nisa es Abraham. God Nisa Abraham. What does the word Nisa mean? What does the word Nisa mean?
Nace means a miracle.
Nace means a miracle. What does Nisa mean? The simple explanation of Nisa is God tested Abraham. Okay? Even though we know Hashem tested Abraham how many times? 10 times. This is the only time where the Torah uses the word Nisa. However, it's very difficult to say that the word Nisa means a test. Because what's a test? A test is you want to find out. Why do you test something? Because you want to find out what the outcome will be. In other words, you don't know what the outcome will be, and you're trying to decipher and determine what the outcome will be. Does God need to determine what the outcome will be? Hakol tzafoy, everything is known. Hashem knows the future. So how could you say Hashem was testing Abraham? Hashem knows whether Abraham is going to pass or not. So what's not a test? A test is you're trying to determine the outcome. Hashem doesn't need to determine the outcome. He knows what the outcome will be. So how could we say the word Nisa means Hashem is testing Abraham? Says the Ramban, I maintain that it does mean Hashem is testing Abraham. But it's not a test on the part of the test giver. It's a test on the part of the one taking the test. Because since whoever's taking the test, he has absolute free choice, he could choose to do whatever he wants. Every human being is given free choice to go on the right path or go on the wrong path. No, let nobody make a mistake and think any aspect of his life is forced upon him, or any decision is forced upon him. Everything is complete free choice, and therefore, for Hashem, on the part of what the Ramban says, the minaseh, the one giving the test, it's not a test. But on the part of the one taking the test, it's a test. But the question is, but we're saying, so why would Hashem make him go through it if Hashem knows the result? The answer is, just because Hashem knows the result, that means Hashem knows that Abraham's heart has the ability to choose the right path. But at the present moment, God cannot reward Abraham for action, because he has yet to perform the action. As of yet, Hashem can only reward Abraham for his good intentions and good heart, and his wanting and ability to do it if asked. But Hashem tests him to do it so that he could actually do it and then be rewarded for his act. In other words, it's not a test. It's just an opportunity for Hashem to give Abraham more reward. Until he actually does it, Hashem can only reward Abraham for his thoughts. Now that he does it, Hashem can reward him for his actions. Okay? That is the opinion of the Ramban. The Rambam says, we're translating the word incorrectly. When the pasuk says, "V'ha'alakim Nisa es Abraham," God was Nisa Abraham, it doesn't mean a test. We say in Shemona Esrei, "Teka b'shofar gadol l'cheroseinu," blow the great shofar to free us. V'sa nes, and raise the banner l'kabetz kol yoseinu, to gather in our exiles. In other words, Hashem is going to gather all the Jews from all corners of the world. How are they going to know to come to Eretz Yisrael? Hashem is going to have someone raise a big banner as the crying call, "Come, come, come." The word nes can mean a flag or a banner. So what the Rambam says is, you know what it means, "V'alakim Nisa es Abraham"? It doesn't mean he tested him. It means he raised him up as a banner. How? Hashem raised up Abraham and he says to the world, look at what a human being could accomplish. Look up and learn from Abraham. It's not a test. It doesn't mean God tested him. There's no such thing as God needing to test someone. It means God raised him up like a banner. Look what a human being could accomplish. What does that mean? Look at number 14. Look at number 14 in the second paragraph. This is from the Sefer Mora Nevuchim. The Rambam, besides writing his halachic compendium, he wrote a Sefer Mora Nevuchim. Mora Nevuchim means guide for the perplexed. Actually, the Rambam wrote it in Arabic because that was the language most people understood at the time. And the Rambam writes, the most love that anybody ever had for anything in the history of mankind was Abraham's love for his son. Okay? People love money. People love their life. But here you have a man, he was 100 years old. He was wealthy. He was intelligent. He was spiritually strong. He was the perfect candidate to start a nation. And there's nothing more he wanted than to be able to have a child to perpetuate his legacy. He was the only person in the world who stood up to polytheism and believed in one God. And there's nothing more he wanted than to pass it on to his children. And the greatest love anyone ever had for anything was Abraham to Yitzchak. Especially he waited his whole life to have him. And then Hashem says, slaughter him. So now he's demonstrating that even though the greatest love anybody ever had for anything is his love for Yitzchak, but there is one love that supersedes that. The love of person for Hashem. Even though no one ever loved anything more than Abraham loved Yitzchak, Abraham was showing that love, Avas Hashem, could surpass even that. And that was the banner. Hashem holds up Abraham to the world. Look at what love of Hashem means. Look how great, how powerful, how much a person's heart could feel love of Hashem, that it could surpass even the greatest love imaginable. Okay? So that's what it means, V'alakim Nisas Abraham. And the Radak asked though, God is raising up Abraham. To who? Who's going to learn the lesson? You know, when Abraham took Yitzchak to slaughter him, who was there? So he takes with him Eliezer and Ishmael. But then at a certain point he says, you stay here, I'm going with Yitzchak. So at the time that he was about to slaughter Yitzchak, who was there? No one. So who's...
Hashem doesn't have to test nobody. And he was testing Abraham.
No, so we're saying it wasn't a test. It was, God was holding him up as a banner. Look what a human being could accomplish. It wasn't a test. God knew he would do it. But we didn't know that a human being could do it. Me and you didn't. So the question is, but how is he holding him up as a banner if no one's there? And what? Abraham is going to come back to the rest of the world and say, guess what? Hashem came to me and told me I should slaughter Yitzchak, so I went up to the mountain, and I was going to do it, but at the last second Hashem came to me and he told me not to do it, so I didn't do it. Anyone going to believe him? Of course not. No one's going to believe him. Okay, nice Baba Maisa. No one's going to believe him. The Radak says, Hashem was not holding him up as a banner to the people of his generation. Hashem was holding up as a banner for all those who believe in the authenticity of the Torah. That Hashem's holding up Abraham to me, to you, to all those who are ma'aminim, who believe in the authenticity of the Torah. And the Radak even points out that as polytheism disappeared from the world, the majority of the world believes in the stories of the Chumash. Whether it's the Christians, the Muslims, the Jews, they all accept that this is a factual story. So in essence, Hashem is holding Abraham up as a banner to the entire world as a sign of, look what it means to love Hashem.
I think the Muslims say it's Yishmael, not Yitzchak.
Yeah, that's...
But still, it's his own...
It's the same point, right? Yeah. Okay. I'm going to have two more points. What is the connection between Sarah not believing the report that she's going to have a child and the Akeidah? Chazal tell us, and this is next week's Parsha, that Sarah ultimately passed away from this world. Why? Because the Malach came to her, and the Malach gave her an image that Abraham was slaughtering Yitzchak, and that he did slaughter her. And she believed it, and she fainted and she died. So how did Sarah die? When she received the report that Abraham was about to slaughter Yitzchak, she thought he did it.
She fell off the roof, right? She wasn't moving.
She fainted. Her heart went out. Okay, her heart went out. The question is, why did Hashem punish Sarah in this way? That she should die accepting the false report of an angel? Listen to this. This is incredible. There is a Rishon by the name of Paneach Raza. Paneach Raza means the one who uncovers the secrets. Well, it's a sefer that's not easy to obtain. And he says an incredible idea. He wants to know, look at number 17. B'im Tomar, you can ask, Lama nistaveva misasa yidei ramos hasatan. Why did Hashem have Sarah die through the trickery of the Satan? Where the Satan, the angel of punishment, comes to Sarah and shows her an image that Abraham had killed Yitzchak. Why? It was a false report. Why did Hashem allow this to happen? Says the Paneach Raza, the Tirates Aviv Shel Rabbi Yehuda HaChassid, the father Rabbi Yehuda HaChassid, answers, the Mida b'Mida loy batal. God dealt with her measure for measure. The HaKadosh Baruch Hu medaktik im hatzadikim k'chur hasara. Hashem is exacting with the righteous like a hair's breadth. Lachein be'avain ba'techachesh Sarah Mesa bekichesh hasatan. Because Sarah didn't accept a true report of the angel that she was going to have a child, here the angel comes to her and says, you're going to have a child. And it was true, and Sarah denied it. Hashem says, you don't accept the truth, you'll have to accept the lie. So the angel comes to her and says, you know, that son that you were going to have, Abraham killed him. And now she had to accept it. When you don't accept the truth, the punishment is you're going to accept the lie.
Wow.
Says the Chassam Sofer, look at number 18. He quotes the words of the Paneach Raza word for word, basically. And in the very last line, look at what the Paneach Raza, look what the Chassam Sofer writes. Chassam Sofer, you have to realize, lived end of the 1700s, beginning of the 1800s, at the advent of reform. Look what he says. Ve'davar gadol diber hanavi. This Sefer Paneach Raza, the Chassam Sofer says, he's a prophet. And he's saying something very great. So here you have an Achron in the 1800s saying that something that was written 500, 700 years earlier was prophecy. What does the Chassam Sofer mean that these words are prophecy? What he means is like this. The Chassam Sofer was living in the age of the advent of reform. And he sees Jews who are being duped into what is fake Judaism, where their pastors tell them, Shabbos is not traditional Shabbos. Shabbos, you drive to shul, or you speak on the microphone. The pastors convince them of some type of fake Judaism. Why do these Jews believe it? Why do they fall for it? That's not Shabbos. Shabbos is not driving. Shabbos is not using the organ. Shabbos is not speaking on the microphone. Why do they accept it? Why do they believe it? Their pastors tell them, no, kashrus, it's just for health reasons. So just make sure you cook the food well. Why do they accept it's not, whatever they're telling them, it's not for health reasons, it's not for spiritual reasons, and they accept a false version of Judaism? Why do they fall for it? Says the Chassam Sofer, because God is punishing them measure for measure. Because when you don't accept the truth, when you don't accept authentic Judaism, you're going to fall for unauthentic Judaism. You're going to fall for sheker. Because if you don't accept the emes, then the punishment is God will make you accept that which is completely fabricated. And therefore, the Rishonim say that because Sarah did not accept the report that she was going to have a child, which was a true report, her punishment was now she's going to accept something which is not true, and that's how Sarah ultimately passed away. And that's what the Chassam Sofer means. Ve'davar gadol diber hanavi. He's calling the words of the Rishonim prophecy, because they were able to understand that hundreds of years later, a time will come when people will come to Jews with complete fabrication, and Jews will have to accept it out of a punishment, because if you don't accept the truth, you're going to accept something which is not true. Shkoyach.
Sarah's punishment was much harsher than those Jews.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.